Delila, I want to ask you many questions about your documentary, Can You Dig This, in terms of the filmmaking aspect. But for one quick moment, I just want to go to something you said on another show. And I think you mentioned that halfway through making the film, you weren't sure that you could continue. I'm sure it was an emotional thing for you. Anybody who sees the film will definitely see how that would be possible. But did you change your mind in terms of wanting to make another film after Can You Dig This was in the can?
I've gotten over that hurdle. It is true that I'm probably more reticent to jump into any doc, knowing how much it takes and how much of your life you have to really give up to what I believe is tell a good story.
Okay, and I know you open the film with some pretty heavy self-disclosure. Was that something you intended to do right off the bat? There was some really heavy stuff that I resonated with, but sometimes documentarians don't always talk about some of their motives behind making a film.
Right. I mean, I don't know that the idea behind the doc was always going to be something that we put into the documentary. During the process, we had a lot of feedback sessions, like at least 30, probably less than 50, somewhere in that range. And one of the people that we were really lucky to have sit with us and give us some feedback was Boaz Yakin. Do you know who that is? He's an amazing director. And the movie was pretty much cut. But he was like, I'm not sure I understand the premise. And we're like, really? How could you miss the premise? And so, because our introduction hadn't set it up well enough. So it was something that I wanted to be a part of the movie, but I hadn't figured out exactly how yet. So I kind of pitched it to the producers that we go back and tell a bit of my story so that people have a better understanding of why it is that we're exploring these character journeys. And so the reason behind my interest was then incorporated into the beginning of the film.
So in all of the sort of the sessions of watching the various cuts, those were his notes to you to really tell your story, so it sort of solidified it right
It was
away.
just very simple and kind of like we all felt like we were 5, because he said, I don't know, I just don't get the premise. And we're like how do you miss the premise? I mean, that's like pretty, we all felt pretty, we put so much work into the movie, and something that seemed so obvious to us and that exceedingly obvious to me, because it was my reason behind making the movie. But sometimes you're so close to things that you can't always tell, which is why I think it's so important to, I guess, like even if you're a screenwriter, to open yourself up, to people and be able to accept critique, so that you can make your project better.
Was it your intention to make a food documentary? I mean, there's been so many these days, and it's so much more than just a food documentary. But was that your initial intention?
We did not want to make another food doc, and I respect and love a lot of those documentaries, and I think it would be difficult to compete with them at this point, and probably unnecessary. And I also didn't really want to go about trying to expose any more bad food systems in any more detail, or get into kind of like attacking our corporate system or anything like that. And I feel like it's almost kind of like an affirmative idea that if you tell a story and focus on what the negative aspects are, that people are gonna walk away with this sort of brain recording going, it's not okay, it's not okay, it's not okay, rather than tell all the reasons why everything is okay and how easy it is to resolve some of our age-old issues, which for gardening, which is one of the things that I did discover, because I'm not a gardener, was that it's something like breathing. It's so innate, but so many intelligent people and capable people are afraid of planting tomatoes or afraid of lettuce, and including myself. And so I really wanted to make the story something that made gardening more attainable for busy people, for everyone, and come at it from a really positive place. And I think I'm getting that sort of feedback. I feel like people are going into dialogues and are very inspired after seeing the movie at the screenings that we've done so far.
Very much so, and I don't want to give away too much about the film, but I love the way you incorporate the stories, the gardening, the photos, the music. I'm sorry, not the photos, the drawings. You have the illustrations. So, and I think that it's nice that there's a spiritual component to the gardening. It seems like people really gain healing through doing this, and so I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. So yeah, it's so much more than a food doc, and I really love the film. When you set out to make it, was it, and forgive me, my own self-disclosure, I didn't know much about my own father, so I hope that's okay to ask you more about this, but were you also seeking answers about your own father and in turn really who you are? Because a lot of that's missing when you don't know another parent.
It's true. I was curious about South Los Angeles because my mom brought me up in Hollywood. So I'm interracial child, and I had this sort of eclectic white mom and my very charming black dad from South LA. And they weren't really together so much, my parents, but he would take me to South LA quite often. And it's not like my life was, so cushiony in Hollywood, but I did see a huge disparity between the two areas when I was a kid. And I think it's something that I just went about my life and just never quite addressed. And so I stopped seeing my dad after I was 9. And I just was very curious to know if, we're in America, we have this idea of like pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps, that, if you have the impetus to do something, you should just be able to do it. And my question is about resources, and maybe that's true. Maybe you don't need a lot of support, and maybe you don't need a lot of resources, but there's some things that my dad, that I saw him do, and the challenges that he faced in his life, that I wanted to see if that's the same in the area. Is that my own experience? And if he did have tougher circumstances, what was he up against? And then that kind of does connect for me to gardening, and Ron Finley saying that he can change lives through planting a seed in an area that is notoriously dangerous. So it was a definite personal exploration.
So, because you've been a dancer for years, and you also did, I believe, a narrative film before. This wasn't your first one, but first doc. Was there a moment, or did you? I know Ron Finley did this amazing TED Talk that has like over 2.5 million views. Yeah. What came first? The meeting Ron, or wanting to search for your?
It was, my father, I had found out, I had like some people from my family reach out with these strange numbers on my phone. I'm going, who are these people from calling me? And it turned out my father was sick and wanted to see me. And so that was kind of the strange, why does he want to see me? I don't really know him that well. You're an adult and you get through your life without a father figure, and you don't feel like it's not a sad thing. I just don't, I don't know him or need him, I guess. So that kind of pulled me back into the area. And then it was somewhat organic because I had already been talking to the producers at Delila Films about maybe something that was more in the narrative platform. And they showed me a Ron Finley LA Times article. And that inspired the conversation. So it was kind of one of those things that just sort of happens like serendipitously, you know, when you're looking for something and everything kind of falls into place that creates a project.
Interesting. So, then I believe the article was about how one of his neighbors turned him in for planting vegetables, and there was some city ordinance that you can't grow vegetables like on his medium in front of his house or something.
Yeah, it's
some ridiculous thing. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't plant carrots in your parkway. This is illegal. But there are now laws that have changed due to Ron Finley and Ron Finley's efforts. Now it is possible to plant vegetables in the parkway where all the grass is. Now it is legal in Los Angeles County. However, across the United States, it is still primarily illegal to plant where the grass is, which is a very antiquated law. And I think what was interesting when I was following Ron Finley, I went to the city council meeting, and you know, I tend to think, oh, it's just bureaucracy. I think of them as they, and you know, we can't get anything done, and I feel like people are, you know, feel apathetic about politics. And then here I see the city council, and these people are very much a lot like me. They just are doing that job, and they've got to deal with paperwork to make things go. And the majority of them don't want to stop people from eating healthy. They have kids of their own. They see that it's too expensive to eat at Whole Foods every day, no matter what neighborhood you're from, and they want the laws to change. What they were worried about were things like the city getting sued, because if somebody plants a spiky plant or something that a kid eats that's somewhat, you know, toxic, or which those arguments they make sense and they don't, because, you know, I'm sure that there's trees that you can't eat either, you know, but it was just like getting through this like kind of big bureaucracy to get us to this place where we are now.
Well, I know Ron is a force of nature in the film. No pun intended. Sorry. And he's one of the producers on the movie. But you also had so many other interesting individuals. I mean, each one, no one really paled in comparison. Each one's story was really unique. Was there anyone or a few people that you had to cut out of the film? And if so, what was your reasoning for having to not use their interviews?
There are two people that it breaks my heart that are not in the movie. Well, one is because you only have so many minutes to tell everybody's story, and if you divide up, you know, 80 minutes, that's 20 minutes each person, not including Ron Finley, to have a beginning, middle, and an end. It's not possible to do, I believe, more than that and tell a true personal story. But we had one woman named Miss Teresa who lived in Inglewood, and her apartment overlooked a basketball court in an area that was pretty crime-ridden. This is an older woman from the South who was quite lonely and had southern manners and felt a little bit alienated there. And then this organization called Social Justice Learning Institute had put in a really simple about 12 garden boxes on top of the concrete, like got rid of the basketball court. And slowly but surely, kids are coming out and planting things and asking questions. And here she is now, instead of overlooking this basketball court, she's looking at these garden boxes and seeing kids out there. And then she goes out there with all of her knowledge from the South and starts teaching these little ones. And then the seniors from across the street are coming out because a lot of them can't feed themselves. So they're actually eating from the garden. So that now Miss Teresa's meeting some of her neighbors that are her peers. And the area has gang members, but nobody is, you know, doing anything bad to the garden. They are protecting the garden now because they respect it and love it. And it creates this community now where everybody's coming out and either eating from it or meeting their neighbors. And it's completely changed her life. These 12 boxes, these garden boxes, very simple garden boxes. So that's Miss Teresa. I'm hoping that we can include some of her footage in the VOD. And then also there is Hanif, who had a garden on the Compton Creek. It was an illegal garden. That one for sure is illegal. He lives in a senior home in Compton, and he was a Vietnam vet. He was a paratrooper with PTSD, and he used the garden for therapy. It really wasn't to eat from it, and he's hilarious because he doesn't like the other seniors. They're like old people, they talk too much, they get in his way, and they're always trying to, what do you got over there? What are you growing? And he's, reluctant, but he opens up as well. And he's amazing. He's like into Native American spirituality, so he sages off his plants, and he's always trying new ways of planting because it's hard to get water over there. So he's also one of my favorites, but we had to cut him out because he's so close to Hosea. So Hanif, we're also pushing to put his story in the extras for VOD as well.
Well, speaking of reluctance, I noticed with several of the subjects, for lack of a better word, that at first their body language, they were turned away from the camera. And then once the movie got going, I definitely saw them trust you. At least it appeared that way to us, to the viewer.
Yeah.
How did you break that down, or was it not really breaking down, it was just letting it be?
I think it was a mixture of time, which I guess is letting it be, and also being open and vulnerable myself. Because if I'm not open, they have no reason to tell me anything personal or forget that I'm there. So I had to forge real friendships with people that I would not have gotten to know otherwise. So it really forced me to grow as a human being. And sometimes you think, oh, director, I can be introverted. I can just get behind the camera and like whisper my ideas to people, and hire an actor who is gonna take those ideas, and it's their job to make it happen. But with a doc, you get hung up on a lot. I showed up at gardens for like a 4 o'clock appointment and would wait in my car till like 8 or 9. And nobody would show up. You want to get angry? You can't though. This is people's lives. They don't necessarily want a camera in their face. Contrary to popular belief, not everybody wants the camera in their face. So I think it was just perseverance, not getting upset if people don't pick up the phone, if they don't return your call. That made me grow. Also, usually like once someone doesn't call you back once, you're like, fine. Whatever, I would call 8, 9, 12, 16 times, get stood up, and just keep showing up with my camera.
Wow, that's interesting. So maybe, being less sensitive was some of the outcome? Yeah,
less sensitive, not taking things personal. And also I learned that, it's so cliche, but not taking no for an answer. I mean, and it really does seem that most no's can turn into a yes. I think that if you are coming from a good place, and you are trustworthy, and I think that there was definitely a bond that I had to create with people so that they realized that any portion of their life that was going to be exposed would be something that they would feel okay with. So they trusted me to represent them in the best light that I can and still tell the story.
Right. Do you think that people were afraid of being judged, being misunderstood? Was that part of it? Or just having to acknowledge their own stuff, and it was scary to have to, then maybe they'd have to watch it? And I mean, there was a lot of painful stuff they talked about that I could see why they wouldn't.
Yeah, I think that's a hard question to answer in some ways, because I don't know that people they know that you're doing a documentary, but they're like, is it going to be on YouTube? And like, they don't know when you say documentary if that's 3 minutes, or what that means exactly. So I don't know that people are thinking that introspectively as far as what they're going to appear as. But I would definitely say that I find it somewhat challenging to sit with my characters in some moments during the movie, because it is their life, kind of flashing right back at them, and I can't imagine what that even feels like. Like, this interview can be unnerving, but to have to dissect yourself, and that's got to be rough. I don't even know really what it feels like to be a documentary subject and how that feels. But I think that they're all okay with it.
So was there a point where you said, okay, you can see your interviews now, or did you show them dailies? How did that work?
I absolutely did not show anybody dailies. I think I showed maybe like a few still pictures, just to say, hey, look how cool you look in this. I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. You're not answering the phone. Look how cool you look. And then that sometimes would help, and sometimes it didn't. But yeah, definitely not, because they didn't want people to feel aware of themselves, so that they would know how they look and how they're coming across. And I didn't share anything about how I felt like their story arc was, and I tried not to lead anybody down any path that would make them self-aware when I was asking questions either. I feel like it would be like if I went to your house and you made me lasagna from your garden, and we just chatted and I asked you questions all over the gamut, and then cut it together to tell a story about how great you are at making lasagna, and how much care you put into it. And I would hope that I would capture those elements from the questions that I asked, but I wouldn't tell you that I was after that.
Okay, so when because I mean, you get each person, each character has some pretty interesting and at times very troubling turns. How long were you following these individuals?
At least a year.
Wow.
Yeah, and a lot of time spent in South LA, a lot of time in my car, a lot of time not being able to find anything to eat, because it is South LA, which is a food desert, which was like, kind of this existential, like, wait, I'm making a doc about not being able to eat in South LA, and I can't find anything to eat. It's like, wow. But yeah, basically, living there for a year, not sleeping there, but living with people very, very closely.
Interesting. And so when you are turning on the camera and asking questions, again, you were saying that it wasn't so much leading them down a certain path, it was just, how was your day, what happened, but very innocent.
Right. I mean, I would have an idea of what I was asking about, and I mean, they're not stupid. They, if I ask Spicy about jail, right, for instance, he knows that we're interested in that portion of his story. So
yeah, and that was apparent at times. You could definitely see him maybe putting up a wall and then letting you in, but toward the end, it definitely seemed like people really did trust you, and that was interesting to see that in the beginning, the sort of turning away from the camera, even the physical, and then opening up more. So I thought that was fascinating. Just curious what you shot on?
A C300.
Okay,
and then also I used the 5D. I found the 5D kind of hard, especially at 12 noon. Like, I can't look at that LCD and get it focused well enough. And I know that there's some like attachments that you can put on there, which I found out in retrospect, to create almost like a viewfinder for the LCD. And I didn't really figure out the filters as well with that camera. I really loved the C300. It was heavy as all get out, and I know they're marketing it as like this lighter camera, like that my girl arms after a while just would start sinking, and then I would use my elbow and place it into my hip, like as if my hip is the tripod to take the weight, and sort of curve around the camera all day long. And then especially Kimani, because I don't want the story about Kimani to be like this adult viewpoint. You know, I want it to be from her perspective. So I was constantly in this sort of plie of sorts, like, you know, shooting Kimani hunched over. Yeah.
Did you have another DP, or it was all?
Yeah,
it was all you? Okay.
I did. Yeah, I was like going through all the cameras. I got off on a tangent, but we used also the Bolex, which I didn't shoot on the Bolex. We had Edu Grau, the amazing Edu Grau, who shot A Single Man, and he shot Suffragette, the Meryl Streep movie that just got released, and so he was our DP for Ron primarily, and JB. I can't pronounce his last name.
Yeah, I saw the last. Yeah, I have it here somewhere too.
Sorry, JB. But he did a lot of our. We shot on the Lumix. A lot of our traveling shots. We got a car mount and did that. He did a lot of that. He did some B-roll of Ron's garden. Got like some beautiful, amazing stuff there. Another DP, John. Yikes. I can't remember his last name either, but he came in for one day. But 85-90% is when there's like one-on-one interview stuff or in the garden with the characters. It's me. The GoPro, our drone shots was our producer Christopher Leggett. He got those. He's just like a tech head, so I'm afraid of the drones.
We weren't sure if it was, if you had a helicopter or what, so that looked great, the overshots of the garden. When you were in South LA and there were some, police shots and different things, what was your protocol for shooting some of that? I mean, how fearful were you, not of just the neighborhood, but the police as well, not wanting you to shoot them?
Right. Well, the thing is like, there are police driving around South Los Angeles, like, there are buses going by in Hollywood. It's just a constant presence, and same with the helicopters. And I never really felt like anything was going to happen to me if I aimed a camera, as long as I'm not antagonizing anyone. Yeah, and as far as being afraid in that area, I think that's kind of like a twofold question, because I know that the crime rate is higher there, so that's in my mind while I'm there. But also, if I'm walking around any part of the city with $14,000 worth of equipment, a girl all by myself, with one eye covered and earphones on and can't see behind me, I'm always going to feel a little edgy. So I definitely was, I would say, more on edge than I would be. But it's hard to determine, because I feel like I'm a little ballsy in that sense, like especially if I'm trying to tell a story that's not about me and it's for, I believe, a greater cause, that I'll put myself into situations that are, worth not my life, but, my life.
And lastly, just wrapping up here, were you surprised though by how many people were intrigued by a female with all this gear on walking down the street? I know you said before people were hesitant, but were there some that were just like, wow, what are you doing? Like, what are you making?
I did get that. I definitely got people stopping me on the street to ask about the equipment and what I'm doing, and I got a lot of support too. A sister out in the hood with my gear and like, hey, tell my story. It's like, you gotta listen to my story. I got a lot of that too. Like, okay, let me take notes. I'm busy right now. I can't do your story. Give me your information. But I did get a lot of support out there. I thought it was actually really great too, to be sort of an example in South LA of like, not only just like a Black woman or mixed woman making a movie as an example in the area where there's no film school that I know of in South LA, and then also being female and hopefully empowering other women that even if they're not going to be a filmmaker, just seeing someone do something that looks like out of the box, or something that we don't see regularly, that I think that it definitely was inspiring for people to see.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.